Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing episodes 129 and 130 of Steven Universe, Off Colors and Lars's Head. So, to recap, in the last few episodes of Steven Universe, the Diamonds wound up sending a team of gems to Earth in order to gather humans to bring back to the human zoo, as they were, at that time, they were still under the impression that the cluster was going to emerge and destroy the Earth. As such, going off of a list that Steven had unintentionally given to the Diamonds via Peridot when she was still a bad guy, they began kidnapping Steven's friends one by one. While Steven and the gems attempted to stop them and save his friends, sadly their efforts were not exactly going well. As such, in a last-ditch attempt to save all the people he cared about, Steven turned himself over to the team of gems and allowed himself to be brought back to Homeworld to face punishment for what his mother did to Pink Diamond. Though, unfortunately, there was still one human that was still captured, Lars, who, when the gems had attempted to free all the humans, rather than staying and trying to help Sadie, he ran away and hid on board the gems ship, and so when they left Earth, he was on board. Unfortunately, while Steven and Lars did their best to try and make an escape attempt, ultimately it ended in failure, and they were brought to the gem homeworld where Steven was promptly put on trial. And while the trial did reveal a few inconsistencies with Rose's whole Shatter Pink Diamond story, including how Rose was even able to get there at all, and the meta-knowledge that she was able to shatter Pink Diamond with a sword that shouldn't have been able to shatter a gem, well, the courtroom kind of went into an uproar as Yellow Diamond, getting upset, especially when Steven's Zircon lawyer wound up sort of accusing the Diamonds, wound up zapping both her and the prosecuting Zircon, resulting in an argument breaking out between Yellow and Blue Diamond. However, in the midst of this argument, Steven managed to make a getaway, as as part of the trial, Steven's lawyer wound up asking Blue Diamond to bring out her palanquin, and so while the Diamonds are arguing, Steven grabbed Lars, who was brought in as essentially evidence for the trial, and they managed to hijack Blue Diamond's palanquin and make a run for it on Homeworld. Though sadly, they didn't really make much progress, as the last time we saw them, they had crashed the palanquin, which is where Off Colors opens up. And I'm just gonna give one compliment so far. While we don't really get to see a good chunk of Homeworld in this episode, except for maybe some parts of the seedy underbelly of it, from the brief bit we do get of Homeworld, we do get an impression that this place is, well, I guess for lack of a better term, alien. It's the Homeworld looks very futuristic in design, like with all these colorful buildings. Almost looks like light rail technology, instantaneous travel. It all feels like just an advanced alien civilization. But at the same time, it also gives the impression that it's cold, sterile. Like while everything here runs at an efficient pace, there's no soul. And I like that you get that right off the bat. The whole place, despite looking all colorful and futuristic, feels just cold and distant. And I like that. It's a nice way of setting a mood for what the characters are in for, and well, they are in for some shit, as we do end up checking back in with Steven and Lars, and while they do have a few scrapes and bruises from the palanquin crashing, ultimately they're fine. Unfortunately though, when Yellow Diamond made her outburst about how Steven's now on their world and there's no escape, well, she wasn't wrong. Steven and Lars are now on an alien planet with absolutely no avenues of escape. They have no idea where they are. They have no way of knowing where exactly they have no idea how to traverse the terrain of this place. They are just kind of up shit's creek without a paddle, so they have absolutely no idea what they're doing. So, in an attempt, as such, while Steven and Lars are trying to brainstorm ways of getting out of this, unfortunately, they end up running into trouble, as while they're running around, they end up running into what is a Robonoid. But this one's a very different Robonoid than the one we saw Peridot using, as rather than this one being an orb, this one's actually like I want to say a pyramid, as it has four sides that are triangles that all come to a point, while the bottom side is an eye that just kind of goes around areas and scans things. And so when Steven and Lars see it, well, it immediately directs attention to them and begins scanning them, while Lars tries to say it won't see us if we just stand in place, which he even admits that he got that advice from a movie about dinosaurs. Sadly, ultimately the advice doesn't work, because it turns out that what this thing was actually scanning for were gemstones, and well, it picks up Stevens right off the bat and immediately just opens fire on the pair. As such, Steven and Lars, realizing that they can't exactly fight this thing, end up making a run for it. Though unfortunately, running can only get them so far, because, well, again, they're on an alien planet. They have no idea where they're going, and even Lars starts kind of as they continue running, even when they finally manage to duck for cover, even Lars admits that he just hates the fact that he's just being so cowardly, that ultimately he feels that this is his fault, that he just was too afraid to do anything, that he was afraid, he was always afraid of sticking out, making an ass of himself, and the only thing he was even good at was baking, and even he was afraid of doing that, and so on and so forth. Again, it feeds back into his character development, which I'll get to later. However, as Lars is beating himself up and Steven tries telling him to calm down, sadly the Robonoid that was chasing them ends up getting closer. However, help comes from an unexpected place, as from a hole in the ground, a red hand pops up and gestures for Steven and Lars to come in and join it. And while Lars is a bit hesitant to follow the advice of a random person, basically, it's even Steven surmises that it's probably a better option than the robot that's shooting lightning at them. So Steven and Lars immediately duck down into the hole to try and take cover. And sure enough, the Robonoid does manage to avoid them. As such, Steven immediately tries thanking the person that saved them, and then the person, well, they're in shadow, and as they ask Steven and Lars if they're all right, and what I like is that you don't see the person in full detail. You only get bits and pieces of an outline. You see 2 feet, but 2 heads, 2 voices, and they look pretty similar. But as Steven and Lars do start asking this person who they are, we see a glow come from their midsection. And yeah, this person is a gem. But I say this is a person, well, technically they're 2 people. Because you see, this person is their name is Rutile. And, well, they can usually be used as a gender-neutral term to talk about someone who is either that is non-binary or does not conform to one specific gender. This person is quite literally 2 people. This is the closest thing because you see, this Rutile is the closest equivalent we have to conjoined twins in gem culture, because the Rutile gem that makes up their body splits in the middle, and thus, like the gem, Rutile, right from her waist up, splits in 2, as their abdomen just kind of splits right up the gap. And as a result, she has 2 heads, both of whom, while still technically being part of the same Rutile, are ultimately 2 distinct people. And as a result of this, they both don't have control. They both have only control over one arm, which does kind of suck. But what can you do? As such, of course, Lars freaks out at seeing the two-headed woman, and while at first Rutile just seems to kind of cower back when she sees Lars's reaction, Steven ends up telling the twins that it's okay, they can calm down, they're fine, Steven's a friend, and so Rutile tells Steven and Lars to follow them so that they can lead them somewhere safe. As such, Steven and Lars do end up following Rutile, and she ends up leading them to a kindergarten. Only this one is vast, really fucking big. It carries the same, decrepit, dead, and disturbing nature that you got from the Alpha Kindergarten on Earth, but this one is so much bigger. It's almost cavernous. There's they have pillars that with just dotted with holes all around it, to the point where there are only a few inches here and there of the rock that were clearly not used to mine gems. Basically it looks like it's like if you took the entirety of the Grand Canyon and then mixed it together with one of those deep, dark caverns that archaeologists tend to dig down into, and mix them together and turn it into a kindergarten. That's what you've got. And yeah, it's very imposing. It definitely gives you the chills. But that imposing nature also makes it a good hiding spot, because it turns out Rutile is not alone. As she or they, I know I'm mixing up their pronouns, but I really have no idea which ones are the proper pronouns for her, so I might use them interchangeably. I don't know. Point is, Point is, the Rutile twins end up leading Steven and Lars into the kindergarten, and it turns out that there are more misfit gems down there. One of them is a fusion by the name of Rhodonite, who is a fusion between a ruby and a pearl, and she is very much paranoid to the point where she's afraid of her own shadow. There is there's a sapphire who, well, is not blue, and whose gem is on the back of her hand. Okay, I call her a sapphire because she kind of looks like one, but she's not a sapphire. Her name is actually Paparacha, and unfortunately, her big flaw is that she can predict events that have already happened, and it got annoying. It got annoying quickly. But ultimately, she's not the last member of this group, as the final member is another fusion, a big one, a fusion of 6 gems, by the name of Fluorite, and she's kind of slow, but also has a nice bit of a motherly attitude to her. She feels kind, wise, and old, but I dig. Kind of gives her the impression that she's the parent of the group. As such, when Steven sees all these gems, of course the natural question is, what the heck are they doing here? And it turns out that these gems are what are called off colors. Basically, they're gems that for whatever reason do not fit into the fold of the great gem hierarchy that's been set up on the planet, as in one way or another they're all flawed. For Rhodonite and Fluorite, their big flaws are that they're fusions of various different gems. Hold on one second. Apologies, had to deal with something dog related. But yeah, like I said, for Rhodonite and Fluorite, their flaws are obvious. They're both fusions, and in gem culture, fusing with a gem of a different type is considered taboo. And of course, that's even more so for Fluorite, it's pretty clear that she's meant to be an XP of a polyamorous relationship, since she's a fusion of 6 gems. Thea mentions that she might be open to more if she meets the right gem. So yeah, it's obvious where their flaws lie. Hold on a sec. Sorry, I had to remember a name. But in the case of the Rutile twins, their flaw is, of course, that they're basically two gems in one. They came out deformed with their gem having a spike in it, and the only reason that they even survived as long as they did is because when they initially popped out, all the other Rutiles ran away and screamed in fear. They're from the very moment they were born, they kind of felt ashamed of what they were. And in the case of Paparacha, as I mentioned, she's a sapphire that can only predict things that have already happened, which, not very useful. Also an annoying character trait, but whatever. Point is, all of them in some way, shape, or form are wrong by gem standards, and as a result, all of them, in order to try and survive, have ran away and hid for the past, as Fluorite says, few eons. They've just been trying their best to stay alive, just go under the radar, make sure that no one finds them, just doing everything they can to survive, because they know if they are found, they will be shattered, and quite frankly, none of them want that. Hold on again. Chinny came in, sorry. But yeah, Steven, of course, immediately sympathizes with the off colors, as they're called, and their plight, and, well, he doesn't really see anything wrong with them at all, since, of course, it's Steven. Steven's accepting of everybody. He loves everybody, and when it comes down to of course, when it comes down to the crystal gems, all of them are misfits, too. So, of course, he immediately feels sorrow for their plight, and even Lars is feeling sympathy for them, and feels sorry for how things are going. But sadly, this touching and sad moment is immediately thrown off the rails, because it turns out that Steven, Lars, and the Rutile twins were followed by more Robonoids. So immediately, everyone just ducks and covers, because, of course, as we saw, the Robonoids are scanning for gems, and if they detect any of the off-colors gems, they will shoot to kill. So as such, while all the off-colors just try and find places to duck and hide, unfortunately, this is a temporary solution, as the Robonoids are being very thorough. While they try and find ways of getting around them, unfortunately, things are kind of going bad. In the midst of all this, Lars is once again freaking out and just getting scared, but Steven kind of just reminds him, Lars, it's okay to be scared. And that little phrase does kind of help Lars out enough. However, as Lars is getting comforted, 2 of the Robonoids end up zeroing in on Rutile and start scanning the area she's in, with the scanners almost zeroing in on her. Lars ends up seeing this, and finally getting a burst of courage, finally realizes I can't just sit by and do nothing again. And as such, he gets out of his hidey hole, grabs a few rocks, and just starts chucking them at the Robonoids, which in turn causes them to stop scanning before they find Rutile. And sure enough, as such, the Robonoids end up trying to scan Lars, but since he's a full human, he has no gem for them to detect. So from their perspective, he's invisible. Which immediately the group starts using to their advantage as Lars just starts trying to kick the asses of all of the Robonoids, as one tries going after Paparacha, who immediately tries telling Lars that he's invisible to them, so he'll be safe, and yada yada yada, so he goes in to save her. He grabs stalactites and stalagmites and just starts smacking the Robonoids aside one by one, and just starting to break them. He starts fighting them off. He and Steven actually start joining forces as they start breaking through Robonoids, and it's honestly really cool. And seeing all this, and seeing all this, all the other Hoff colors are just kind of watching in awe. And again, because Lars is essentially invisible to the Robonoids, he's also able to block their scanners from detecting any of the off colors, since he can use his body to cover up their gems. So of course that means that they're all invisible. So of course that means that he can also protect them. Yeah, protect them. The point is, he's a good defense. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied and it annoys me. But basically, Steven and Lars are managing to put up a good front against the Robonoids, and while the Robonoids are primarily targeting Steven because of his gem, at the end of the day, he and Lars are still making good progress. Unfortunately, though, as this is going down, Lars ends up managing to jump onto one of the Robonoids after protecting Rhodonite, and of course, while the Robonoids can't detect Lars, they can immediately tell that someone's riding on top of them, and the Robonoid he's riding on top of is just trying to shake him off, and even starts shooting lightning in an attempt to hit him. And as such, to try and protect everyone else, Lars takes the stalactite that he was holding in his hand, and then just slams it right into the Robonoid's eye, which in turn causes the thing to just blow up. Unfortunately, the price for this victory is, well, bit higher than anybody wanted, as once the Robonoid explodes, Lars is immediately just thrown right into the central pillar of the room they were in, and then just falls to the ground, and he doesn't get back up, which Steven immediately notices. And then when he goes to Lars, he doesn't react, he doesn't say anything, and when Steven puts his ear to his chest, he doesn't hear a heartbeat. Yeah. Lars is dead. And Steven is... he's horrified. And just all at once, he starts breaking down. He just stops, sobbing. And as the off-colors gather around Lars's body, Steven just holds Lars's body in his hands, and his tears just start rolling down his cheeks, and he's just saying, "I'm sorry, Lars, I'm so sorry." But the tears end up falling off Steven's face and land on Lars. But it's here that a miracle happens, because from those tears, Lars starts glowing. And from the point that they made contact with his body, his skin starts changing all across, until eventually Lars is pink. And not only that, he wakes back up again. And here's the thing I didn't mention when he died. When Lars died, his hair was covering up like this side of his face, which is most likely where his fatal injury was, because once he gets back up and manages to move his hair aside, you can see a scar running right over his eye. And once Lars gets up, Steven and the other off-colors are just completely shocked, which is where that episode ends and Lars's head begins, as everyone is just trying to figure out what the hell happened. Of course, even Lars is like, what's going on? What do you guys want? Why are you guys looking at me funny? But Steven, well, he's just happy that Lars is alive, as he immediately just embraces him in a hug. As such, he immediately just does a quick drive-by version of what happened to Lars about how they were fighting together, how he was caught in the explosion, and how he stopped moving, how Steven kind of brought him back to life. And Lars is like, wait, you brought me back to life? So I was away from life? And it's at that point Lars notices that he's turned pink. As such, he's just like, and of course, he's just like shocked and doesn't like. What I love is that he has no idea how to register his newfound transformation. Like, he's not angry about it, but he's not sad about it either. He's not angry about it, but he's not happy about it either. He's just like, he doesn't know how to comprehend this. And even Steven's like, I don't know how this works either. I've healed people before, but never like this. So, and they're just kind of like, they're just kind of throwing everything back and forth as both of them have absolutely no idea what the hell is going on. But eventually they have to put that on hold because the rest of the off-colors can hear more Robonoids outside the cavern. And so Rhodonite, Rutile, and Steven end up managing to push a boulder right out of the way, though Steven also kind of does the lion's share of work. But either way, it managed to block the entrance to the cavern so the Robonoids don't find them. As such, the off-colors realize that they need to get out of this area because, unfortunately, as long as Steven is here, they are going to be made targets. Though, unfortunately, they also realize that if they leave this area, then they'll be sitting ducks out in the open. So it's a matter of which. So it ultimately just becomes a matter of which way do you prefer to die, so to speak. But as Steven and the off-colors are wondering this, Lars is still wondering what the hell he is, even at one point proposing that he may be a zombie. But Steven thinks that no, he isn't a zombie, and when he puts his head to Lars's chest, he does hear a heartbeat, but only once. So he is alive, but it's like his metabolic processes have slowed down internally. I mean, externally, he's fine. He's acting exactly like Lars. He says he even feels fine, normal even. He's doing good. So, so clearly whatever is keeping him moving is keeping him in some state of being alive. It's like he's just been slowed down, so to speak. As such, Steven began. And on top of that, even as Lars is looking himself over, he even notes the color of his hair. Because, yeah, even his hair changed color, too. It's still pink, but it's a very lighter shade of pink. As such, at one point, as Lars is taking it in, Steven decides to try poking and see what happens. Only when he pokes it, a light glows from where his finger made contact, and he pulls back. Which he and Lars freak out at, and Lars tries touching his hair to get the same effect, but nothing happens. As such, Steven begins kind of realizing something. As such, he asks Lars for permission to do this. Well, actually, he doesn't ask Lars for permission. He says, I can't do it, but Lars tells him, do it anyway. I don't know what the hell's going on, so literally, whatever idea you have, just do it. So, Steven decides to ask Lars to kind of kneel down, and tells him, you may feel a slight foot in your head. And so, while Lars is confused, Steven quite literally sticks his foot in Lars's head. And yep, the same thing happens. He's able to the light glows, and Steven is able to stick his foot into the light. Okay, actually, Steven at one point put his hand in. So yeah, from there, Steven takes another step into Lars's hair, and yeah, he's able to actually go in, and he's even able to put his body in. And well, once his head's sticking out, he takes a breath in, and then just dives down. And sure enough, he ends up in the field that's in Lion's Mane. Only when he goes in there, he sees that there's a different tree. One that looks like it's in full bloom, like it's covered in leaves. It looks like it's at the height of its life. And of course, as Steven looks around, he notices that that's not the only tree here. As a little bit away, he sees Lion's Tree, complete with all of the memorabilia that Steven and Rose kept there. As such, Steven goes over to that area of this pocket dimension, and once he's there, he immediately tries diving back under all the tufts of grass, and he pops out from Lion's Mane, right back in his home. And of course, the first thing that Steven does is just immediately start gathering supplies. At first, he's happy to be home, but the thing is, he hasn't had any food or water for a few days now, so he immediately just starts gorging himself as he gets a couple glasses of water and just downs them right away. He then makes himself a PB&J to satiate his hunger, which leads to a somewhat amusing, somewhat sweet scene, where as Steven is eating PB&J, he just is crying tears of joy. He just goes, life is wonderful! And after he downs the thing, he quickly realizes, oh shit, I need to get something for Lars, and so he immediately puts a bag lunch together. But before he can step back into Lion's Mane, he stops and realizes something. He brought Lars back to life, and now Lars is pink, with his hair now acting as a portal to a pocket dimension. And did we finally learn a little bit more about Lion here? Yeah, they don't outright say it, but it is very clear that the reason why Lion is pink and has the abilities he does is because the same thing happened to him. And Rose most likely brought him back to life with tears as well. And the instant that Steven comprehends this he's just like, "Oh, Lion, I'm so sorry." And like he says he wishes that he could talk to him, learn more about what he's feeling. But Lion, being the loyal pet that he is to Steven, immediately just kind of bows his head down so that Steven may step back into his mane, which I like that. It's just sweet. As such, Steven goes back in the Lion's Mane, and sure enough, he manages to take the pocket dimension back to Homeworld and pops out of Lars's head. As such, Lars asks for more questions, and so Steven pretty much gives them the more complicated version of your head leads to the pocket dimension that Lion's Mane leads to, and sure enough, which yeah, even there it kind of sounds confusing. But the point is this: they have a way home now. That Lars's hair can, if that pocket dimension is connected, if the pocket dimension in Lars's head is connected to the Lion's Mane, that means they can travel through that into Lion's Mane back on Earth and thus get home that way. Only one problem: Lars can't go through his own head. He even tries. He like steps through it, like Steven tries like pulling him through, but unfortunately, all he really does is just hurt Lars's arm to the point where he can, and all he really does is just hurt Lars's arm. So yeah, so Lars can't really go back through his head. On top of that, we also learn a bit more about Lars's physiology because while Steven brings some snacks, Lars says he's not hungry and he can eat it later. As a side effect of being brought back to life, it takes longer for him to starve, as he can still eat and drink and all that stuff. He just doesn't need to at the moment. However, going back to the whole revelation of his head leads back to Earth, Lars pretty much just tells the off-colors, look, I may be stuck here, but you guys go. You said that this world is dangerous for you, but on Earth, you can be yourselves. You can live your lives. You can enjoy everything. You can actually revel in it and be happy and not take it all for granted like I did. Just do something. Actually be happy. And while at first, Rhodanite's more than happy to take Lars up on the offer, Flora immediately stops her, and it turns out, yeah, all the off-colors are in agreement. None of them want to leave Homeworld if it means leaving Lars here to fend for himself, because, well, he's an off-color now, and off-colors don't leave each other behind. And so they make it clear that while they do want to see Earth, they do want to see this planet that Lars is talking about, but they don't want to go there if it means leaving him here. And well, they know how the ins and outs of Homeworld, how to sneak around, as they've been doing it for very long, so they can help Lars out. But put simply, they just tell Lars, we are staying here, and we're going to help you any way we can, which I like that. It's a nice bit camaraderie. However, Lars does insist that at least Steven go, because after all, everyone on Homeworld is looking for him. So the longer he stays on Homeworld, the more at risk he is. And while Steven is reluctant to leave because, well, doing that is effectively abandoning Lars just tells Steven, look, you saved my life. Let me at least make it a life that was worth saving. Which I like. I like that. I'll get to my thoughts on that later. But the point is, it's a touching moment, and before Steven goes into Lars's head, he tries to kind of give Lars a reassuring pat on his chest before Lars just pulls him in for a hug. It's sweet. As such, with the final goodbyes, Steven once more steps into Lars's head and pops out of Lion's Mane back on Earth, where he's able to get his bearings again. And well, he arrived at just the right moment, because as Steven popped out, the warp pad in his house immediately lights up, and we see the crystal gems plus Connie and Greg there, and it turns out that ever since Steven left, they've been trying to find ways to get off planet and rescue him. And basically one of the ways they've been doing is they were trying to power back up the dropship that we've seen in previous episodes. Most likely the one that Peridot tried using to kill the crystal gems, or maybe the one that the Centipedal and her crew are in. But either way, they're trying to get it all powered up, but sadly, it's too decrepit. They can't get it moving. However, as Pearl is lamenting this fact and going on about how they'll never get out of here, she immediately goes, oh, hey, Steven, and then she immediately goes, oh, hey, Steven, before pausing, realizing Steven is there, and after he says hi, what I love is that everyone just looks at him incredulously, with Pearl even having tears in their eyes, and everyone just runs forward and embraces Steven in a group hug. It's sweet, and I love it. So, and that's where the episode ends. So, okay, so my thoughts on these episodes. Considering how interconnected they are, I'm going to pretty much consider them like one and the same in that way. I'm going to consider both of these episodes as one episode. So, my thoughts on both of these episodes? I think they're really damn good. for the one on the like, for example, immediately a tone is set from the beginning of Off Colors. Like I mentioned, while we only see Homeworld very briefly from that brief little snippet, we are able to get the impression of just how cold and sterile the gem Homeworld really is. It feel like it's bright, colorful, futuristic, brimming with all this technology that we couldn't even dream of. And yet it feels like there's no soul to any of it. It feels hollow. It feels distant. It feels, for lack of a better term, alien. And it's a great way of showcasing just how much up Schitt's Creek Steven and Lars are. Not only are they in an unfamiliar territory, but it's a territory that feels hostile right from the get-go. Not just because Steven is rose quartz and is an intergalactic outlaw. It's because this whole planet just feels unwelcoming, unfriendly, that nothing here wants to help you, that everything here is against you, and that if you want to survive, you just need to find the best places to hide. It's a great tone setter, and immediately just kind of gives you an impression of just how much Steven and Lars are going to have to fight to survive. And after that, with Steven and Lars being immediately set upon by a Robonoid, it still immediately makes you realize, it still immediately showcases that danger is quite literally around every corner. As the instant the Robonoid scans Steven and finds his gem, it opens fire on the pair. So considering again how unfamiliar that Steven is with this terrain, it's not something he can just easily fight back against. So it's clear. So he's very much on his own in this regard. And before you say, well, he has Lars, I have to remind you, Lars is a regular human, and the gems, like the entirety of the gem race, are super powered aliens. They have enhanced strength, they can shapeshift, they all have different abilities depending on the type of gem they are. My point is that while Steven might have a slight fighting chance with his powers, Lars is a sitting duck. So Steven is kind of sort of on his own, and while Steven may have his own set of abilities, even he can't fight an entire planet. So it immediately just helps showcase how hostile everything is from the outset, and immediately stacks the deck against our heroes in that regard. But what I like too is that you get some brief bits of hope when we meet the Off Colors, because what I like here is that it helps with what I like here with the Off Colors is that it showcases that there are some gems that are outcasts is not something small. I'm trying to think of a good way to articulate this. While the crystal gems are considered the outliers of the gem hierarchy, considered traitors because they don't have a place in the whole gem caste system, and actively abandon that, fight against that, and even by virtue of their identities, they're considered wrong. Like with Garnet being a fusion, Pearl having a master, and Amethyst coming out as a shrimp instead of big and burly. We immediately we meet the Off Colors. We immediately see that there are more than just them on the outskirts. As, like I mentioned, each of the Off Colors, in some regard, is meant to be an outcast. Rutile came out as twins rather than as a single Rutile. Fluorite and Rhodonite are fusions, which we've established is a big gem no-no, as fusing between two different types of gems is considered very much taboo. Even, like I said, even more so with Fluorite, considering that she's a fusion of 6 gems. And then you got Paparacha, which is just a sapphire that came out wrong, kind of like with Amethyst. Sorry, Chinny just jumped on the bed. Basically, you immediately just get the impression... Hold on one second. Different dog, same antics. But my point... Sorry. My point is this. The Off Colors all have some inherent flaw, but those flaws really only exist in the form of the gem caste system. Okay, maybe an argument, maybe Paparacha has a flaw, because I'm just gonna say this right now. While I did grow to like Paparacha, in the beginning I found her annoying. In fact, even when I eventually grew to like her, I still found her annoying. Because her whole shtick is that she predicts events right after they happen. And it's not quirky. It's dumb. It's really dumb. Like, imagine, everyone's just moved along in the conversation, and then here Pop Roger's like, oh my god, this is about to happen, even though that happened not even a minute ago. It's dumb. again, I grew to like her because admittedly this whole predicting things that have already happened thing does kind of come in handy in a few areas when people don't know how to read the room or are making a fatal flaw that they don't know about. But otherwise, it's dumb and annoying, and even when I grew to like her, I was like, oh my god, shut up. So. On that regard, but basically, what I do kind of like with showcasing the off colors is that it showcases that the number of outcasts in the gem hierarchy might be larger than you realize, because these gems are gems that refuse to conform to the system. But unlike the crystal gems, these gems do not believe that the only way that they can survive is by hiding, which in a way kind of makes sense because, well, when they because in Lars's head, when Steven and Lars try advocating that the off colors go back to Earth, well, they're kind of incredulous, because after all, the story, because apparently the stories told of Earth on the homeworld are that it was decimated in the Gem War thousands of years ago. And so of course there's nothing there, and so kind of imagine that, and kind of imagine growing up with that story in your as part of your day-to-day life, learning that because this group of gems refused to be a part of the Grand Order, they stepped out of line and decided to be things different than what they were supposed to be. It led to them starting a war and being completely destroyed. I feel that would be a great fear tactic. Pretty much just telling everyone, step out of line, you die. It's a great way of it's essentially just ruling through fear. And the off colors are a perfect example of that mindset kind of executed, because, well, they immediately all see them, because despite the fact that they all live the way they do by choice, or in some cases some of them have no choice, like in the case of Rutile and Paparacha, ultimately they're told by everyone, you're wrong. You don't deserve to exist by virtue of your wrongness, which I think is a nice way of kind of, I think it's a nice way of kind of having having the off colors act as proxies for, well, I'm trying to remember the word. Sorry, give me a sec. Sorry, I was trying to think of the proper word, but yeah, they're good proxies for minorities, outliers in society, just people that even in our day-to-day lives are considered abnormal, which I think it's represented well. I like the way that we see it represented with the off colors, because the off colors themselves are not bad people. While I found Paparacha annoying, all she really wants to do is help out, and she wants to be there for her friends and support them in any way she can. For Rhodonite, while her paranoia does kind of make me kind of groan a little when I see her, considering how how she's had to live her life now that she's a willing fusion between a pearl and a ruby, she kind of just kind of lives on the outskirts, as while she doesn't want to give up what she has here, clearly, clearly the gems that make her up are happy with this fusion. At the same time, growing up in the society, knowing that that what you are is considered wrong, of course she'd be paranoid, because even she admits that when her commanding officer found out about her, the pearl and ruby that made her up were very quickly replaced. So it's made very clear that she most likely has had to do a lot of things to stay alive. And when you kind of live that life every day, of course you're going to be paranoid. Even the Rutile twins are honestly fun. They're sweet characters. They're very nice, very open. And while it's clear that the weight of everything they've been doing has kind of crushed them a little, there is still a sense of optimism as they're with people they care about and want to help others in need, especially as we saw showcased with Steven and Lars. Even Fluorite, like I said, is just like, she feels like a kindly mother of the group, as she feels older, wiser, grander. As while she is slower, as showcased by the fact that she's a fusion of 6 gems, she's also the one that advocates the most for the more peaceful options. She's the one that talks about, she's the one that first tells the group, no, we're not just going to abandon you, Lars, when he says go back to Earth and leave me here. She's the one that when she sees Steven and Lars, they're like, oh, who are you? I'd like to meet you. It feels very open. She feels very open. And I kind of like that. What I do kind of like is that I like how they kind of represent her as a polyamorous relationship. Yeah, for any of my viewers who are polyamorous, and I feel I am not doing this justice, I apologize. Like I said, I'm not polyamorous, so I really wouldn't know. I really wouldn't know anything about anything. So I'm just gonna stop talking before I dig myself into a hole that I can't dig myself out of. My point is, I do like how they showcase that here, especially showcasing how she's kind, she's caring, and how she's very open to meeting new people, which kind of makes sense considering that even she admits that she's willing to add more gems to her fusion if she meets the right one. So I dig that, it's nice, and I dig that, it's nice. Just from the offset, they immediately set up these characters as as nice people. It's just that by virtue of what they are, they just don't feel they belong. They don't feel they belong in Gem society, which makes sense since it's been probably hammered in everywhere that they don't belong, which I like. It immediately opens you up to them and makes you feel sorry for them, but it also and of course makes you not want to see anything bad happen to them. But by virtue of that, because they've been through so much shit, they know what it feels like to go through the fires of hell, so to speak. And as such, it kind of helps showcase why they're so willing to help Steven and Lars, as they are also sort of outcasts on this world. They're two humans, well, Lars is full human, Steven's half gem, on a world they know nothing about, when being hunted by the diamonds. Of course they would feel sympathy for them. Of course they want to help them. Especially in the case of Lars, who risked his life to save them, was killed and now brought back to life, and now is essentially trapped on Earth, or now trapped on Homeworld. Of course they would feel sorry for him, and I like that, and I kind of like that basically by living this life, it's kind of hardened them in a positive way. It's kind of made them more empathic towards other people similar to them. And while we do have and while there is some kind of, and while some of them are a bit more paranoid, Road Knight. And yeah, I love how, and yeah, Road Knight was quick to jump in. Again, it's more that feels less more in the sense that she's a coward, and more she's done everything she could to survive, and is always afraid that something will pop up that will get her. So I like the way they showcase that and kind of bring them together. As a result, they feel like nice characters, and like I said, which initially what started this rant in the first place, their existence showcases that while the Gem Empire may like to put on this resolute face and showcase that they're strong, they're perfect, that there are no imperfections and all that bull crap, that it's clear that there are still imperfections, that the crystal gems aren't the only outliers out there, that there are other gems that don't fit into the mold, but for one reason or another may not say anything, which again is a nice way of kind of mirroring real life, because because from my experience with friends and so forth, I'm not going to list specifics. I've heard about how when you realize certain things about yourself and people consider it wrong, it can make you hate yourself in a way. And while I'm not going to say that I know all those struggles, as I don't fit into a lot of those molds, I do have my own share of issues, because my mind does not work like a lot of other people do. And it isn't until like a while ago that I learned that I'm potentially neurodivergent, which honestly does explain a few things about me. So as a result, and I do feel that, because even nowadays it feels like that I'm just not, that there are some things I just don't get as easy as other people. That's something that should be like simple for other people to get. It takes me a little while to kind of fully comprehend, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't like that. But the way they should, but when you meet other people who think like you, have dealt with similar issues and want to help you, it can make you feel less alone. It can make you feel accepted, loved, and it helps you realize something. You're not alone. And in a way, I like how they represent that with the off colors, because it not only sets the idea that the Gem Empire may not be as strong as we thought it was, but it also showcases that, but it also, I feel, is a nice kind of mirror to reality, and kind of is a nice way of outputting the message. You may think, just because everyone says you're wrong doesn't mean you are wrong. You're perfect just the way you are, and regardless of what anyone says, you're good. You're perfect. Faults and all, you're your own person, and that's something you should be proud of, which I like that. And I think it's represented well with the off-colors and how they find strength in being with each other, with helping each other, with supporting one another. And and the way they with all of them having their own having their own separate problems and quote unquote defects, I like that it kind of helps showcase how all these different bands of misfits brought together, and through that mutual bond, they've all grown closer and become something of a family. Again, it's good stuff. I like that. I like that. So that's some nice stuff. As for another strength of the episode, Lars. As I mentioned in the previous vlog, these episodes very much are kind of like Lars going through forced character development. And I don't say forced as in, oh man, this feels forced, like this shouldn't be unnatural. No, I mean, he is pretty much thrown into an environment where he needs to adapt or die. And so as a result of that, Lars kind of has to force himself to finally confront his flaws. We saw him start confronting them in the Stuck Together episode as he realized that part of the reason that he's in the bind that he is because of his own cowardice, his own refusal to change. And as a result of that, as a result of confronting those fears, he and Steven start having a bit of a heart-to-heart and start growing closer as they start trying to comfort one another in this situation that neither of them have any idea how to resolve. But then you get to Off-Colors and Lars's head. In Off-Colors, Lars is now officially trapped on an alien planet with no idea how to get off of it. There is no means of getting food, water, or any kind of escape, and he just starts kind of beating himself up even more as he realizes, I hate running, I hate being afraid, I hate not being able to do anything. I like that because, again, it's a good mindset. When someone is so stuck in their ways but wants to change, that frustration is very much real. They don't know how to change. They don't know how to fix things. Even when people says that everybody needs to change is not as easy as you think. And it feels easier just to slip back into your old ways. But when you do slip back into your old ways, you start beating yourself up on the inside, which I know I ranted about last episode, so I'm not going to get into it here. But we see that reflected perfectly with Lars here, as he realizes I'm here because of no one's fault but mine. I didn't run when I had a chance. I didn't help my friends when I had a chance. I didn't go and be friends with everybody when I had the chance. I've shot myself in the foot here, and I don't know what to do. I love that, and I love just how afraid, and I just love how it's reflected with Lars in the episode. And of course, Steven has to try and give Lars that bit of comfort. But what I do like is that throughout the episode, Lars is not annoying. He freaks out a little when he meets the Rutile twins, but honestly, I think anybody would freak out in that scenario. But likewise, he acts empathetic to the Off-Colors when he meets them. He is not screeching his head off like in the episode Lars and the Cool Kids. He actually is just taking everything in, letting Steven lead the way because he knows Steven knows more about this stuff than he does. But then likewise, when he is told information, he listens to it and actually tries comprehending it in the best way possible. He feels sympathy for the Off-Colors, and then likewise, when Steven and the Off-Colors are cornered by the Robonoids, he does start freaking out again. But when Steven tells him it's okay to be afraid, it helps him kind of get a burst of courage in just that one moment. And what I do like is that while Lars is beating up the Robonoids when he learns that he's immune to their scanners, well, it's clear that he has no idea what he's doing. It's another little thing that I like here. That we actually see Lars trying to undergo change now. Because ultimately when you are changing, it's not something that just happens overnight. You can't just immediately become a new person right off the bat. But it takes little steps. And when we see Lars actually seeing a situation where he could run away again, well, he learns from his regrets and decides, no, I'm doing something and I'm gonna do it right. As he just immediately goes on the offensive and starts trying to fight off the Robonoids and defend the Off-Colors. It's actually really nice, and I love his reactions when it happens. Like when he starts beating up, when he starts smacking them aside, he's like, oh my god, this is probably the bravest Probably the coolest thing I've ever done. I like seeing him and he doesn't stop. It's like an adrenaline rush. Like his mind, like his body is moving before his mind can react. And odds are, if Lars did stop for a second and everything was, and he had a moment to calm down, he probably would be freaking out because he's risking his life on an alien world fighting robots. Who wouldn't freak out in that regard? But the adrenaline rush combined with his drive to not sit back and do nothing allows him to start doing all these fantastic feats that he has never done before. And while it does eventually lead to him getting killed and then later revived, at the end of the day, he doesn't regret it. He does not regret what he did. And likewise, when he undergoes when he's brought back to life and undergoes his change, he is of course freaking out and asking questions like anybody would. But then when Steven tries offering solutions, he's immediately like, "Ew, no, don't do that." He's like, "Look, I don't know what I am, but we need some clues and we need information. You know more about the stuff than I do, so I'm willing to listen to you and just do it. So just do whatever you need to do." So I like seeing that. And by the end, when Lars offers to just let himself be stuck on Homeworld alone while the off-colors go to Earth, it's kind of clear that Lars just trying to do his best to be a better person this time around. And I like that. Well, it's clear he doesn't want to make this decision. Like he wants to go home. He wants to get off of Homeworld just as much as that he wants to get off Homeworld just as much as Steven does. But by virtue of him realizing his own faults and trying to be better, it's nice. It's nice, and it leads to him just trying to make all these heroic sacrifices. But then likewise, when the off-colors tell him, "No, we're not going to abandon you," he still insists, "No, Steven, you have to go. You're in danger here. You're in danger here." And by the end, when Steven tries to still kind of respect his respect his boundaries as he just kind of taps Lars's chest, Lars just embraces him in a hug because for once in his life, he's allowed to be bare. He's allowed to express himself. He doesn't have to worry about what others think about him. He's now in a situation where, well, the good Lars can come out, and he can start doing things without being afraid of how others will view him. Because he's among people that he can trust, people that accept him, and people he wants to protect. It's nice. It's great character development, and I love the way it's showcased. I admit, it feels a little bit rushed in some regard in these episodes, as while I do kind of understand Lars trying to make that leap, the way he kind of keeps jumping forward and kind of even further bounces away from his whole freaking out phase that we would probably see Lars acting up in previous episodes. Again, I don't think it's bad. It's not awful. A little rushed, but fine. It's good. I like it. It's really good, actually. On top of that, we still get some nice action when they running away from the Robonoids and Steven and Lars duke it out with them. And the revelations that we get in this episode, I think, are honestly really damn good. We get two good ones in that regard. The first is, of course, the answer about Lion and how he connects with Rose, because as we saw with Lars, well, the reason he got that pink coloring was because he most likely died and Rose brought him back to life. And that revelation immediately casts Lion in a very different light, because we know that at some point in his life he passed away and Rose most likely shed tears of sorrow. And those tears of sorrow brought him back and turned him into the Lion we know. And I like how they kind of hint towards that, because we know that Rose hung out with lions in the past. Thanks to Dewey's book, thanks to Buddy's book, we know that when Buddy confronted her in the desert, she was hanging out with lions. So odds are it's clear. So I like that that did kind of come back up and further and again, it just makes you want to know more about Lion's story. What happened to him? What happened to him and so forth. So I like that. But another subtler thing that definitely grabbed my attention, well, it's kind of Homeworld ironically enough. Now, one of the questions that I've always had, that I kind of had with Steven Universe since its inception, or especially when we learned about how gems are made, kind of led me to one question. Where do gems come from? Like I said, we know how they're made. You take an injector, you inject something into the ground, it drains all the resources from the ground, and then they eventually pop out as a gem with all the resources inside, and then make them big and strong and all that crap. But the thing is, the ones who put that process in place are the diamonds. They're the ones on top, and they're the ones that keep making and producing new gems. But the diamonds are gems too. They operate just as much as any other gem would. They have gems that act as the only parts of their body that are physical. Their actual bodies are hard light holograms that if got enough damage is applied to, they will poof out of and can reform in a different body. They have different powers. They all have different. Essentially, while they're more powerful than your standard gem, they're still gems. So, and odds are that something happened that made them. So my question is, where did they come from? Something is clearly going on, like someone clearly made them for a reason, but we don't know what that reason is. But a hint that that Homeworld may not have been their Homeworld originally kind of comes from the kindergarten that we see in the episode. As I mentioned, the kindergarten, it was big, vast, like this a giant cavern with every surface of the walls just being dotted with holes that gems most likely popped out of. But the thing is, when Ruta was bringing Steven and Lars to that kindergarten, she mentioned how it was a forgotten place. So it's clearly been abandoned. But considering how big it was and how many gems are there, it made me wonder how much life was on this planet. Because a gem can't pop out of a sterile environment. There has to have been life that existed there before that they can drain out of. So what was Homeworld like? Because when you see just how vast the cavern is and see all the gems that popped out of the walls, it makes me just ask questions. It makes me wonder, what was this planet like before the gems arrived? Because the implication here is that the gems didn't originally call this place home. Eventually they called it home. Eventually they popped up on this planet and made it their home base. But how? How did they get here? Why were they formed here? Who made them? What was this planet like before Gemkind? It begs the question, and it makes me more curious about how the gem hierarchy works. How the race came to be. Like, what led to their creation? What made them what they are? Did the diamonds form naturally, or did someone make them like they make other gems? I want to know the answers to these questions, and we're never provided answers for those questions. So, but it's interesting to think about, and I like that little subtle implications of having those questions when you see the kindergarten. It's good. I like it. So, but yeah, on the whole, these episodes, I think, are really damn good. It not only creates a sense of tension by having Steven and Lars trapped in an alien world, but it keeps the stakes going with them being hunted. We get some nice introduction with the off colors, which I think are a nice representation of underrepresented groups and people in society, and how and kind of showcasing how, and I think they're a good way of showing kids how if you feel weird or out of place, that you're not wrong, that while people you're not wrong or ugly or deformed, you're perfect. I like that. It's a nice way of showcasing that. The action is really nice. The character development on Lars's part is great. And while I do feel it's a little rushed, at the end of the day, I do like where it ends up by the end of the episode. I like the revelations we get regarding more bits of the lore with the episode, especially with Lion and Co. and the potential implications of the origins of the gem race in relation to Homeworld. And the final shot of Steven returning home and embracing his family, it's just the sweetest stuff, and I love it. So there you go. So yeah, I think that's really all I can say. I thank you for watching. I hope I did not offend anyone hope I didn't offend anyone in any way via this video. And if I did offend you, I am so sorry. I really am sorry. I didn't mean to. And and if I did offend you, please tell me how I offended you so that I can properly I'm just sorry. I'm sorry. I really don't mean to offend anybody. My point is, I do just hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do still enjoy my inane blabberings, I hope to see you next week as we see the aftermath of Steven's trip to Homeworld, and unfortunately see him kind of bear the consequences of his actions. So, yeah. Till then, hope you have a good Friday. As always, Samuel Johnson. I'll see you then, hopefully. Take care.